Well, welcome, folks. We drink and we watch things.
Yeah, we are.
I'm Mackenzie.
I'm Lemar.
And we are ready to drink and talk about things that we watched.
Correction, drinking.
Drinking, yes.
Yeah.
We've been drinking.
Yeah.
We had to. This took a little bit to set up, as per usual, I think, really. Wait, but what are we drinking? What are you drinking?
I have this. Is this homemade your part?
Yeah, I did make it, actually.
Yeah, this is a delicious sangria that I am sipping on, and it's wonderful.
Okay, if you want to get technical, it's a clérigo.
If I want to get technical, it's a clérigo, so that's cool.
We also have spooky mugs. I feel like wish I could show them what we have mug-wise.
You can post it on the socials.
Yes, we'll post it on our Instagram. We drink and we watch things. But yeah, so I have a skeleton mug full of what I call my boozy coffee. I know, super creative name. It's got a couple shots of the good stuff. Some Irish cream and some frangelico or hazelnut liqueur.
Ah, you throw some frangelica in there.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple good ones, but I do like that one a lot. It also has a cool little outfit on the bottles.
I went through a little phase, I think, shortly after college where I was big into frangelica. They were doing what we called chocolate cake shots. And it's like mostly frangelica. I think there's like a vodka or something else in the shot glass as well. But then you chase it, or like you bite into after you drink it, a lemon wedge with sugar poured on it.
Wow.
And no lie, it is just like your mouth is filled with chocolate cake, and it's wonderful.
What?
We did them at bars a few times, and then we tried to bring it home and do it ourselves. And we realized you do 3 or 4 of those, and your stomach is messed up. For the entire day.
All the sugar.
Yeah, I would recommend
how does that
one.
work with the lemon wedge?
I have no idea how it all comes together. I don't know who invented this and discovered that it tastes like chocolate cake, but it does.
Okay, somebody explain to us. Come to us in the comments and let us know how this works, because I need to know the chemistry behind it.
There's a mixologist out there somewhere who can explain
some mixologist or baker or somebody knows what the hell that's all about. I love that. Okay, cool. So we're ready to drink, and we have our spooky mugs, which, of course, is because it's October. It is spooky season. It is my favorite time of year and the apropos time to start a podcast for me, really. If we're going to launch a podcast, spooky season is like my good luck charm.
I think so, yeah. October's always been my favorite month of the year. I love everything about it. I don't love the weather down here in Texas in October compared to the Northeast where I grew up. I think
it's much more spooky season.
Yeah, you
weather.
Miss out on a true autumn, a true fall. The leaves here just turn brown and die at some point. There's not really a transition at any point. But everything else about October, I love.
All right, time to talk movies. So in honor of spooky season, what we wanted to do was kick it off with a spooky theme and start with spooky films. But quick background on me. I'm just a film nerd. I just like movies. I watch a lot of freaking movies. And so it was really hard to find something, like just to narrow down the topic for today, like hone in on a topic, hone in on a movie. And Lemar is the best person to talk about these things with because he loves spooky season, spooky movies as well. But tell him what the plan was for today, what we had to do.
First of all, thank you for saying that I'm the best at something. Suck it, Dad. Mackenzie's one of the biggest cinephiles that I know. And I think I've seen probably more horror movies than any other genre in my life because I've been watching horror movies since I was 10 years old. So it was a little difficult. We didn't know if we should stick to classic viewing, stuff that everyone has seen, or newer stuff. And then it was, let's take a different spin on it. What movies have you not seen? It doesn't have to be all-time greats, but just what horror movies have you not seen that are out there? And that's what we decided on. So you want to tell them what films we picked?
Yeah, so this took a while for all the reasons. I actually thought that this was going to be easier for you than for me. So what we did was we wanted to pick for each other something that we had not seen and give each other homework. And so I picked something for you, and I think it was literally the first thing I suggested you had not seen, which worked out great. But I thought it was going to be harder for me because unlike you, I am not a huge horror movie fan. I do like horror films. I have a handful that I just truly love, some top 10s for sure. But I didn't think I was as proficient in Halloween horror specific kind of films. You had a really hard time finding one that I had not seen. So I've seen more than I thought.
Yeah, I threw a few out there and you texted back and I was just like, yep, seen those, seen that one. Okay, cool. I get it, Mackenzie. You watch more movies than me.
I just needed the opportunity to hair flip. What can I say? No, I actually was genuinely surprised as well. But I assigned to you one of my favorite. I mean, honestly, if I had to do like a top 5 of my Halloween favorites, this is probably in the top 5, definitely in the top 10, which is Crimson Peak, directed by Guillermo del Toro.
And when you assigned it to me, I actually had no idea that it was a Del Toro film,
Really?
I think I figured it out about halfway in.
Oh.
I was like, this is visually really stunning, but I
okay,
had
this
no
is going to
idea
be so
it was a Del Toro
interesting.
movie. Yeah.
This is going to be so interesting to talk about. Okay, I'm so excited. All right, and then you assign me.
I assigned, and I was surprised that you had not seen this one because it's been around since I think the mid-90s. And based on your taste and a couple other topics that we've talked about before, I thought you would have seen it. But From Dusk Till Dawn, from a Mr. Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like I disrespected him a little, to be honest.
I won't tell him if you don't. So.
Yeah, let's make sure he never hears this podcast, as though he would.
Yeah, so Dusk Till Dawn, we'll get into the details, but I wouldn't say it's in my top 5 Halloween films, or October films for that matter, but it is one where if people say I've never seen that, I just tell them, like, you should, it is a must watch. It's a fun flick.
It's a must watch for you. Okay, cool. That makes sense why you picked it, because that was going to be my next question. Was why did you pick it? So we're going to start by talking about Crimson Peak, and then we're going to lead into From Dusk Till Dawn. If you haven't seen either of these movies, I think this is your turnaround warning now, because we're going to give some spoilers. We're going to definitely give you like a quick plot summary, but also if you haven't seen them, we do recommend them. Yeah. So take a minute to watch them before you listen to this. So for Crimson Peak, it's the story of a young woman around the turn of the century who is very close with her father. She's American, and meets this tall, dark, and handsome man from across the pond, British guy, Enter Tom Hiddleston. And they are essentially seeking funding for his manor back in England, where he's trying to basically make his toy work, his clay mine toy work.
Yeah, he's an inventor, and this is way before the times of Shark Tank.
Yeah.
So he couldn't just get in front of the sharks and get funding. So instead, he goes through other
Wait,
means.
is it sharks giving the funding? Is that how I've never seen that show.
Literal sharks.
Literal sharks handing out money.
Sharks in a tank.
I love that.
Investing there, yeah.
So he had to kick it old school, literally take a ship across an ocean and ask an American dude for money. It doesn't go great, spoiler alert.
Yes.
And so a murder plot ensues. Mm-hmm. And of course, he makes her fall in love with him during that process. They get married. They go back to jolly old England, which, as you will find, is not super jolly. And she uncovers all the mysteries of both this manor and this family. And actually, I think ghosts.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on the fact that there was something special about her with being able to see the dead or commune with the dead in some capacity. But one of the first scenes in the film is her being visited by her dead mother. And I thought it was like, and I might misspeak many times today because, Mackenzie, you said this is one of your favorite films. I've seen it once.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do my best to remember all the names and likenesses.
I've seen From Dusk Till Dawn once. We're going to be fine.
Yeah, this is going to be great. But you can't forget Sex Machine.
Don't jump ahead.
But there's no character named Sex Machine in Crimson Peak. That's unfortunately no crossover with that.
Oh, yeah.
But she sees her mother at the beginning of the film after her mother had died. She's still a child. Her mom passes away. Her mother visits her. For me, as somebody who's watching this for a first time, I was like, if you're this girl's mom, why are you coming back in this terrifying way? They do have her cuddle her in the night and comfort her, but the first image is her walking down the hall with her hands outstretched, and it's like, that's terrifying.
Thanks, Mom. Be as creepy as fucking possible about this.
Mom, I love you, but when you move on, please do not scare the hell out of me if you want to come say hi. I was not on board
maybe
with
whisper.
that.
Let's pull a Casper. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Be cute and bubbly. What is this about? It's not Guillermo del Toro is the thing. He's got to have
that visual sort of look. And it's a beautiful film.
Mm-hmm.
Just
this is gorgeous.
Yes.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, look, jumping right in. That's a high level. We'll get into some more of the plot later. But anyway, I think that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you, which was, what did you notice on a first watch? What stood out? You said obviously a couple of things. It took you a minute to notice the style and the color to figure out who it was as a director. But in the first half before you noticed that, what was standing out, I think?
I think at the beginning of the film, I saw where it was going. I knew it was, they tell you it's a ghost story, right? And I wanted to ask you, because at the beginning of the film, they say that she's an author. She's working on a ghost story. And then they say, oh, you know what? You should add a love story into it to make it more interesting.
Gross.
And as a first-time watcher, but as somebody who has seen a lot of films and I track little hints of dialogue, but I still found myself wondering at the end, What does that mean to you as somebody who's seen this many times? That line about, oh, take a ghost story but add a love story, because that's what this is.
Yeah.
It's a love story plus a ghost story. So do you read any more into that?
Of course, my initial reaction is fuck that. But then also my secondary reaction is, of course, yeah, that's what he does with it.
Yeah.
So there is like this meta irony of it all that he does take it there. But I love the feminist notion of the way that the script is written and the way that the plot is written, that she is a really autonomous person. She's also wealthy. Let's not overlook that. She's the daughter of a wealthy, successful man who has worked hard to make his money, but he is wealthy and she is privileged as a result. So I think she has some autonomy at this time in history that most women do not, right? Like many women are tied to some kind of relationship, some love story, some what have you, that needs to provide them some security and things like that.
And for the record, I'm sorry, this was 1901. I Googled it earlier. This is when this takes place. So even before women had the right to vote. And so,
so she has a surprising amount of independence, I think is what stands out to me about her. And I love that. And I love that he gave her that autonomy in writing this the way that it was written. I love her mic drop moment, too, where she's talking to all those ladies who are trying to catch a man. And they were telling her, like, it's our very own Jane Austen. And didn't she die a spinster? And I love that she's like, I'd rather be Mary Shelley. And she died a widow.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, queen. I love her. I love her character. But yeah, I do think it is a little ironic that ends up being part of the story. But what I do think stands out and I guess augments that intention is that as you find over the course of the story, I think this story is actually less about them falling in love. And I think it's a little bit more about her conflict with Jessica Chastain's character, who is Tom Hiddleston's character's sister, sorry. And they have this direct conflict throughout the film. And it's this, I think, a story of two women, really, and how they interact with each other. And he's important to it, of course. I'm not saying that he's not. Yeah. But I think it becomes less about their love story.
I find that's an interesting take, and I can see that. So much of the film, it feels like she's doing her own thing. The main character's name is Edith.
Edith.
Okay, so it feels like Edith is doing her own thing a lot of times. She's wandering around these castle grounds. She's interacting with different characters and all that. Definitely passes the Bechdel test. All the conversations aren't just about Tom Hiddleston's character. But yeah, I could see that because for this being a quote unquote love story, I do seem to remember that not a lot of their screen time is together.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's Thomas, Lucille, and Edith are the main characters. Thomas and his sister Lucille are, I think, the pairing at the top. You know what I mean? Like that, they're counterparts at the top. They're coupled them at the top in their own weird way as far as balancing that. And then Edith comes in and steals the show and steals his heart. And you can tell because of the way this, story plays out, that's unexpected for everyone. That's unexpected for Thomas. That's unexpected for Lucille, who is incredibly jealous of that dynamic shifting. Yeah. And I think it, then shifts to how do Lucille and Edith start to battle for that role a little bit of being his partner. Romantic or otherwise, they're there to partner Thomas. And I think that they're starting to battle that out over the course of the film a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much into the plot how ahead of ourselves we want to get with the actual plot of the film, but to not, I guess, jump into the back half. It's clear from the beginning that this brother and sister are very close. They are essentially business partners. When we talk about them seeking funding and whatnot, it's very much a two-person operation. So she feels very protective of him. They do, when Edith joins them and moves into sort of the manor that they share, it's just the two of them sharing this big house in the middle of nowhere. So yes, they are clearly a very tight-knit relationship. Both their parents are gone. And yeah, it's interesting to see how that plays out. Not as predictable as you would think on that end.
And I think that's a great question for you, actually, because again, I've seen it so many times and I rewatched it for us to talk about it. But I remember during the rewatch thinking, I can't remember when I didn't know about X, Y, and Z things that happen in this plot. So what did I think about it when I watched it the first time? And I think the thing that stands out to me about their dynamic, Thomas and Lucille, is that you could tell something was amiss from the get-go. Yeah. And Thomas being there, he has it's a traditional meet cute, as it were, right? Yeah. He's reading her pages that she's writing and he's complimenting them. And it turns out he's there to meet her father. Great. But So in that moment, independent of anything else, looks like it could be a traditional love story.
Yeah.
But then enter stage left Lucille at an event that they are all at, and she's playing piano beautifully. Jessica Chastain, actual queen, learned how to play that part. And then they come together, and I think there's this distinct shift for me in Thomas and Lucille. As soon as they get put together, something is a little bit wrong.
Yeah, it feels like she's got a bit of control over him in some capacity. You can tell she's watching him like very closely, and he's aware of that. And so I seem to remember glances his way from her, and he would cower a little bit. So it's like there's no confusion over how the power dynamic is working. Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed this, but I felt like there was a physical darkening that happened. So like he is light, Edith is light. They are lighter together. They meet in a light setting. She's wearing a light dress. He exudes a lightness, if that makes sense. And then even when he picks her up at the house before this kind of gala that they're going to, she wasn't planning to go. She's in kind of this light colored dress. She shows up in a light colored dress. So she's very much being posited as the antithesis, I think, of Lucille, who is wearing a very dark dress. The room is darker. The environment is darker. As soon as they come together, he gets darker. To your point, he diminishes slightly. And so to me, I thought there was a visual darkness as she enters, and it really cues that there is something amiss here. There is a con. There's a con happening.
Yeah. Now that you are saying that, and y'all, if you are not film, and when I say film, I mean film, not just a movie. I like going to the movies, but we're going to be getting into film components. Let's dive a little deep on this, because you saying that, it did it. I do remember throughout most of the film, Edith is wearing yellows and whites, very bright colors. I seem to remember, you said Thomas? I seem to remember Tom Hiddleston, wearing lots of white, not necessarily bright colors, but white.
Yeah.
And the sister is always in dark blacks, dark blues. And I'm wondering if, first off, it's not even that I'm wondering. I'm sure Del Toro did this on purpose. But
1,000%.
There's also, I seem to remember, a mention in the beginning of butterflies.
Yeah.
When they are in America, and Edith is playing with the butterfly, and they're talking about it. And then they mention, at the castle, we only have moths. Darker.
But you'll hear what she said specifically about the butterflies. She said they get their energy from the sun, and when it abandons them, they die.
Oh.
And she's touching them while they're on the floor, and then she's rubbing them against her face, and she's getting this morbid satisfaction out of that. And then, of course, mentions the black moths at Crimson Peak which we don't know it's Crimson Peak yet, but at the manor, and says that they die and they're formidable, is what she says about the black moths, is that they are formidable. And I think another thing, speaking to color, that stood out to me as you said that is, if you want me to super nerd out on you, Thomas and Lucille are aligned in coloring early on. And so insofar as he wears, when they arrive at the manor, he is wearing a blue velvet, like a lighter, but like not a lighter, a darker blue velvet, midway blue velvet suit, jacket, what have you. And she is wearing that same colored dress, Lucille. And she is there ahead of them. Obviously, they have honeymooned and whatever, and she's already been there. And to me, it's like there is a visual alignment of them, an alliance of theirs right away. And it's distinct in the coloring. And Edith is the outside.
Yes.
She's wearing the lighter color. She's the standout. And she stays the standout, I think.
Yeah, she's dressed in bright colors throughout.
Right.
It's typically a yellow, like a very bright yellow, and it feels so out of place.
A yellow or a
manner.
Green or,
She's walking across this black, dark castle, or the white of the snow. There's some really gorgeous shots in this, and that sometimes there's the red of that road in the soil with the snow, but she's the lone, bright yellow standout butterfly, if you will, in this sort of scenery that we see.
Yeah. But she gets tainted by the scenery. You even see it on the clothes, right? Like the clay is red. And of course, that's an intentional motif again, I'm sure. But she walks through the clay and her yellow dress gets discolored by the red at the bottom, the hem of her dress. And same thing in the snow when she walks out in her white nightgown and she's in the snow and it gets red at the bottom. So she gets blood on her. And I think that's symbolic in a lot of ways, right? She gets bloodied by this experience, whether it's physically or otherwise. She's bloodied by this experience at Crimson Peak. It's going to forever change her, but she retains something, I think, about her that keeps her brightness, keeps her purity throughout. That's something that I've always thought stood out throughout, just the colors, his use of colors.
Yeah, and I think that's classic Del Toro. So I think there was a thought that I had about an hour into this where I was like, sometimes I wonder if Del Toro just comes up with a vision of what he wants a film to look like, but hasn't totally even thought through the entire plot of what it's going to be. It's just like, I know I want this shot of this white snow and this girl in a yellow, like, I just can't, I have a hard time sometimes with Del Toro films. I do love him as a director, but sometimes it does feel like so much of the emphasis is on how beautiful it is, and I'm not always connecting with the story. I don't think that was the case in this as much, because there are elements of the plot that we'll get into that surprised me, but I did feel like for the first 90 minutes of this 2-hour movie, I pretty much knew where everything was going. And I think that might just be the product of watching so many films.
Well, yeah, I think when you watch a lot of films in general, but especially when you watch things that are horror or scary or whatever, the way a ghost story, quote unquote, is going to go. So I think that makes sense. But what did surprise you?
Okay, how deep are we getting way into the plot?
Let's just dive in.
One word would be incest. That if I had to summarize in a single word, what shocked me the most that I didn't see. I mean, as we said, we knew they were close. We didn't know they were that close.
It's funny you say that, because I'm also pretty good at predicting things when it comes to movies. It's actually one of my claims to fame. And I feel, and again, it's been too many watches since, so I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty, but I feel like I thought that. I feel like I thought that kind of early on before it's confirmed. Like, I do not remember being shocked ever. Okay. And as you see it in the movie, so Edith is discovering them. That's what happens. Yeah. And they allude to multiple times that he's been very respectful of her mourning, even though they're married and they haven't hooked up and whatever.
And he's not in their bed at night.
He's not in their bed at night. And girl is wanting to get some, poor thing. And she is like, why does he not want me? What the heck?
They didn't even get a real honeymoon.
They didn't get a real honeymoon. Bummer. But that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe this is just because I know men, and I'm like, there's no freaking way. I'm sorry. This would not have been weeks of this. And this guy did not even try anything unless something was funky at home. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I definitely felt like they have a dynamic here that they're not touching on.
Right.
You know?
I knew that, as you said earlier, there's a con going on. They are seeking funding. It's clear that they've done this multiple times. I assumed that it was, yes, he was pretending to fall in love with women to get their estates or their funding, and then they were killing them off. I thought, which is semi-correct, I assumed it was just the sister. Like, she was behind all of it and he was along for the ride. Yeah. And then it turns out he's a lot more complicit than I thought near the end. But yeah, the incest thing was what caught me off guard.
Because I think the natural jump there, too, even if they are involved, is to assume that she's actually not his sister. And
they make a line about that.
And they make a line about that. She goes, "Oh, so you're not his sister." I knew it. And it's, no, bitch, I am his sister. I'm just real gross.
He doesn't even try to deny it.
Doesn't even try to deny it. I think at that point she's a little bit crazy. Obviously. Yeah. So she's just ready to own her crazy.
It's a bummer that this family was around like 110 years before Game of Thrones hit the airwaves, because they would have loved.
They would have loved. Yeah. They would have fit right in. They would have all been homies.
I have never identified with a character on TV so much.
Oh, truly. And I think, again, it's easy to jump to, then she must not be his sister, but then she just owns it. And I think it's a testament, of course, to Jessica Chastain, again, who is just utterly brilliant in pretty much everything that she does. Yeah. But she really owns this character, I think, fully embodies it. She's spoken about this a couple times with regard to multiple characters, of where she's like, I just immerse myself and become that person and become that character. Yeah. And how gnarly must that have been to do that? To really fully become this person who is really touching the boundaries of what is and is not okay as a human. Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that she asked for this role. Did you know that?
I had no idea.
So she was actually asked to play Edith. And then she asked to actually get the part of Lucille. She thought it was a more interesting part.
I mean, and she plays it per that unhinged. I never thought I would be afraid of Jessica Chastain in any role. But the last 30 minutes or so of this, when she just goes balls to the wall insane,
you're like,
yeah.
Everybody got some crazy.
I would probably be running away from her too.
Yeah, I think like I said, she commits. She really commits. And I think actually, especially at that point, Thomas becomes a little bit of an afterthought.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yes.
She just utterly steals the show in her insanity.
And I think that's to your point of, I don't know that I read it as a feminist film per se, but the way that you express that, it is interesting to see that you would expect in this, it's a love story, even though it's a ghost story, you would expect Tom Hiddleston's character to be the main focus of the film, and it never really feels that way. He does feel like an afterthought. It feels like the dynamic and the opposition between these two women ends up driving the majority of the plot of the film.
Yeah.
To the point where,
I mean, moving it forward, yeah.
And to the point where Thomas barely figures into the ending of the film. They have the little ghost scene, but for the most part, it's just, no, this has been about these two hating each other.
And you know what else, before I forget, because I think they are treated as an afterthought, it's also the women who are not present. The women who have died.
Yeah.
Both the mother and then all these 3 other women that the Sharps have killed.
Yes.
Their presence or lack thereof in various forms, whether it's a letter or the phonograph or gramophone, whatever recording that she plays, or her luggage that she finds, or the key that she finds, or what have you. These are all things that, again, drive the plot forward and are all women. They're all other women, dead or alive. It's all women driving this plot forward. And then, both of the other men, actually, we haven't touched on her friend back in America, the ophthalmologist, Charlie Hunnam's character, who he also does an excellent job. I wish there were more of him in this because he's a sweetheart. But he is also an afterthought. They're both an afterthought. And what's funny is that the director goes to Charlie Hunnam and says, I need you to play the damsel in distress. And he was like, I'm sold. I want to do this movie. And I think it's funny to see that he does fit that role early on. Of course, he does try to save her, but then who ends up saving who?
Correct. Yeah. He's bleeding out on the floor while she goes and saves herself.
He's bleeding out. He's being a little bit useless. Save for effort, bro, but you didn't do it. So
and I mean, his character is trying so hard to get laid in this film.
Oh my God, that poor guy.
That is the most hey you up of he's fleeing
crosses the
ocean. He gets a horse in the middle of winter and travels to this castle in the middle of nowhere. And we talked about this earlier. The weirdest thing to me is that he arrives and this poor girl is poisoned and drugged and coughing up blood and passed out on this piece of furniture. And he goes to pick her up and gets uncomfortably close to her face. I get it, they're childhood friends, but it's in movies when you can tell people don't talk so close to each other, but they always do that in films to make it a better shot. Yeah. But he's picking her up and he's like, show me that you're able to walk. Show me that you're able to walk. And he's waiting for her to kiss him. And I'm like, dude, she is in no position right now. She is under the influence. She is uncomfortable. She is dying. And you are up in her face. You came all this way. And it just felt a little awkward for me.
Listen, I still love you a lot, even if you're really sick. So are you in? Because if you're in, I'm in.
We can make this work.
He's like, listen, this guy's crazy. They're crazy. Now's my time to shine. He's like, it's my turn, bitches.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And I know he's supposed to be this kind of pure character, but that does feel like a little opportunistic where he's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't, in the initial seeing him at the start of the film in America, it didn't feel like necessarily a romance between the two. You knew that they were childhood friends,
right?
But just as they were close. But then as the movie went on, I'm like, oh, he's into her.
He is into her. He has been in love with her his whole life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she just sees him as a friend. She has been, looking at him as a friend for too long that I don't think she's been able to make that mental shift. But his love for her becomes obviously integral to the plot, where he's one of the few people really looking out for her. He's reading the room. He's reading the con. He's like, I don't know exactly what the con is, but there is a con. I don't know how deep it goes, but I know it's bad. And it's my duty to protect this person because no one else in the world is still here to look out for her. Her father is gone. Yeah. This is my job now. And he really takes it upon himself. So I think we have to give him a little credit for some purity there.
Yeah. And I mean, he's one of one of the doctors in the early 1900s who was actually good at his job.
Yeah.
Because I think this father was murdered. And the other doctor's like, no, he just fell and hit his head on the sink 8 times. That's how he died. He's
Obviously,
like,
8 times.
What?
It is very normal to get up and fall again and hit your head again over and over.
Yeah.
But, you'll find, too, I think what's interesting is Edith, limited that as well because she just didn't want them to look at him too closely.
Right.
She didn't want them to touch him. And it's not, of course, her fault, but she just inherently didn't want too much attention paid to his body.
She just wanted to,
closure.
It's done.
It's done, exactly. And I wonder if that was, more of a function of, I can't face this, it's too gruesome, than not really wanting to know. I think maybe she deep down wanted to know, but was not capable of taking it on at that time. And probably, of course, didn't assume that the Sharps had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Even if she thinks that there's some foul play, she probably assumes that it's related to something else, her father's business or whatever else.
Yeah.
So I think it was easy for her to stick her head in the sand and go, I can't deal with this.
Right.
I just can't deal with this.
You keep referring to them as the Sharps. And earlier we talked about the sharks on Shark Tank. So I keep wondering if he did get rich, could they have started their own investment firm and then it could have been called Shark Tank? I'm down for the sequel at some point.
Crimson Peak Part 2, the Shark Tank. Oh, we're writing your work here, Guillermo. Give me a call. We got you. We're creating some gold here. All right. I think we could talk about this particular movie. I think I could talk about this movie, for hours, but I won't force you to do it. But I do, before we wrap on this one, I want to get your high level. I want 2 ratings out of you, which will be, I want a spooky rating. So do we feel like this was super spooky? Do we feel like it was Halloween-y? There's inevitably always, what's a Halloween movie kind of debate. Yeah. So do you feel like it's Halloween-y? What's the spook rating?
As far as a spook rating is concerned, a gothic horror love story. It's very interesting. Because I don't think that I would feel obligated to watch this again in October. I wouldn't associate this with horror. That's how I feel about almost every Del Toro film. They are bigger. They have horror components and horror elements, but they feel more like fantastic, like not fantasy films necessarily, but I think that you watch them for just the visual beauty of what he produces and these unique creatures, and you get a lot of that in this with the ghosts are very colorful and they're scary, but they're not terrifying. It never felt to me, it didn't scare me in the least, I would say. Okay. There were times where I felt a little on edge, but because he's not a stereotypical director where he's going to go in for those jump scares, and that I appreciate that about him, but you're going to get...
I do too, jump scares are weak.
Sorry?
I said I do too. I think jump scares are weak.
Yeah, they're predictable. Yeah. And so you're like any Del Toro film, you're going to get those memorable monster or creatures of some sort that are going to look cool, and you're going to remember that more than you remember most of the plot of the movie, for me personally. So I thought it was very cool. On the spook meter, I would only give it like a 5 or a 6. I didn't think it was super scary. It did feel to me like more of just a fantastical film that had a couple pieces of horror elements.
Okay, give us one just for reference, for the listener's reference. What is a spook film for you? Like a super spooky one that would be like a 10. What would that be?
A 10 for me... Are you talking about my favorite horror films? Or are you talking about movies that actually scare me?
Scared you.
Okay.
What scared you?
I would say the first Paranormal Activity. The first time I saw it scared me when I was younger. The Blair Witch Project.
Oh, okay.
Not afterward, because you don't really see a lot in either of those movies, but while I'm watching it, it keeps me on edge.
Okay.
Those are typically the ones that mess with me the most.
Okay.
When I was younger, slasher films like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street would scare me. And now that I'm older, they're more just like kitschy fun.
Right.
But yeah, it takes a lot to really get to a 10 for me. It's got to be something that sticks with me after I see it.
Yeah, no, I just needed to understand your scale. So that helps me a lot. Okay, so overall rating though, what, just as a film, again, not Halloween-y, not spooky, whatever, just as a film, what would be your rating? Would you watch it again? Would you recommend it to people? That kind of thing.
If I'm being honest, I'd give it like a 6, 6.5. I did enjoy it. I thought it ran a little long for the subject matter. I think you could have told that story a little quicker, but I love the characters in it. I love the dynamic between the main characters. It did have a couple twists that I did not see coming, but I thought for the most part, I knew where the plot was going. And for the middle act, I was like, can we just get this moving? Because we know where this is going. So I'd say 6, 6.5. And one last thing that I wanted to say about Del Toro films is that you always get a little bit of gore. at the end. It always feels that way. And in this, that last 15-20 minutes where people are getting stabbed in the face,
man. That is the one that gets you.
Machete and knife fights in the elevator,
and just like the slice along the machete in the hands.
Yeah, and you see the fingers. Like that is classic Del Toro.
That is some gnarly shit.
Yeah,
and I'm not a big gore person, but I think it's aptly applied here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. I think he does an appropriate amount. If you're fighting for your life, these are things that are happening, and I think it was interesting to see Lucille stab him in the face. That's so intimate. And I'm into true crime as well. We've talked about this. Like they say that about like stabbings, but two, like if they're trying to mutilate you in some way, it's personal, and you could feel how personal it was to her, and then she immediately regrets it.
As he sits down. I like that they have the shot of him pulling it out of his face and her realizing like what I just did.
Yeah. And I think that's that moment of just like, I maybe blacked out. You know what I mean? Like I didn't realize that I just did that, but I also like really wanted to punish him. And now we're both going to be punished. Anyway, yeah, very gory, but I thought it was appropriately used.
Yeah. What about you? I know this is one of your favorites. I feel bad for giving it
I was about to say, you wanted to pick a fucking fight today, is what I hear.
Oh, yeah. Where do you stand on this one?
I love this movie. I mean, I love almost everything that Del Toro does. I love that he just pushes boundaries. I love the visuals. I love the colors. I love interpreting the work. I think he gives you a lot to chew on, a lot to try and interpret. You don't have to just watch it. Yeah. I think you can watch it 12 times. Like one of the things, I rewatched this and I noticed stuff this time. You know what I mean? I've watched it so many times and I notice new things every time, which we should do a throwback episode later where I ask you again after you've watched it if you saw anything else that you hadn't before, because that's what I love about his work. Like I can watch it several times, find new avenues, understand it better, I think. So I just think that there's so much richness to it that it's a rewatch and a rewatch. And to me, that's just a solid indicator to me that I love a film is that if I can rewatch it over. And I rewatch this once or twice a year. And so I would say like an 8.5.
Okay.
Probably for me.
Yeah. And I will say that for everything that I've said about it, another thing I do enjoy about it is it's not a film that relies on the twist. It's not as though once you know the twist at the end, you don't need to go back and watch it.
It's
I feel like
enjoyable.
you could enjoy this for the visual beauty. You can enjoy it for the character work because everybody that's in this does a fantastic job. Charlie Hunnam gets to talk in his actual accent, which is fun because I'm used to him in Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, Sons of Anarchy.
Where he's like, trying to do an American
straight
voice.
up a biker accent, rough and tumble.
To hide his British. I'm like, dude, you're so much classier than this. But
he is. He's so much classier sounding, at least. I don't know. We don't know him personally. Charlie, give us a call. We want to know. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you should watch it again. We'll have a revisit conversation about this and then see
we
how
can
you
watch
feel
it together and you can point out like, oh, did you notice?
Oh, I have a whole fucking list.
Okay.
Don't even get it
I'm gonna
twisted.
get the special Mackenzie edition commentary.
Oh my God. I'm going to make you live tweet my commentary too. And people are going to be like, oh, shut up. No, I love it. All right. Want to make sure that we reserve enough time for From Dusk Till Dawn. I'm going to let you give the lead in, give a little high level of the plot. And then I live tweeted this shit as I was watching it. So I had some strong reactions and I was like, I'm going to forget this. So I just started typing it out. So I got a lot to say.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we are moving from super schlocky, bad horror cinema into some quality. I'm kidding.
That was the transition.
It's the exact opposite of what we're doing. We are definitely taking a downgrade for this next one. Not to say that it is not a really fun film, but this is pretty much the polar opposite of Crimson Peak style, like setting.
Did you intend that? Let's start there.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think
because you didn't know much about
I didn't
Crimson
know
Peak.
much about Crimson Peak. I had seen the trailers, I saw the outfits, but I didn't piece two and two together that, we've got this one movie that we're talking about, which is set in this winter European Victorian Gothic environment. Meanwhile, the one that I'm suggesting is a bar in the dive bar in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, very dry.
Could not be more of an antithesis to Crimson Peak, I think, if we tried.
Yeah. So you had never seen this. I think this was might have been my third or fourth time seeing it. So I wouldn't rank it, as I said, in my top 10 horror films, but it is a very fun watch. And so plot, I guess, general plot, if you haven't seen this, I highly I suggest stopping this right now. And if you are a horror movie fan, watch it, especially if you know nothing about it. Because I think
honestly, you're going to be so confused if you keep listening.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it.
And rewatching it last night, I tried to wipe my memory and be like, let me just watch this and pretend I don't know anything about this movie. I've never seen a trailer for it, and watch it from the beginning, because it starts with two brothers on the run. It feels like a Tarantino film, which he did. I mean, he helped write this. Yes,
he was supposed to direct it. He backed out.
Okay. Yeah. And Robert Rodriguez took over.
Yeah, he wanted to focus on his character, which is a great one we can talk about, and the screenplay.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, Chris, if you're listening to this, point out that Tarantino wrote this and gave himself the role of the guy who gets a foot in his mouth.
I 100% said that as I was watching it. You can ask my boyfriend, who also heard me say that out loud. I was like, of course he did, was my immediate reaction.
It starts out with two brothers on the run from the law. Feels very Tarantino-y. They're wearing suits, like no ties. But
it's very Pulp Fiction-y, but in a different setting, yeah.
Jules and Vincent from Pulp Fiction, basically, on the lam, trying to get to Mexico to escape the law, because I think one of them escaped from prison or something like that. So it starts out as that. They run into this family. The father is a former preacher, and his two kids.
Harvey Keitel is a former preacher. We can't overlook that. Keep going.
Yes. And then you've got Juliette Lewis as his daughter. And I don't know the name of the actor that plays the son. I don't think he did a lot after
I don't think he
this.
did either, so I feel like a jerk
I feel
now.
bummed. Yeah, I feel bummed out. But they take them hostage. You find out, I don't know how much into the details of the plot are super important, but essentially Tarantino's character is a psychopath, and he's killing hostages
0%
that they're
shocked,
supposed
by the way.
to be using for leverage, and he kills their hostage, so they end up taking this other family hostage instead. And then the plan is, we're going to flee to Mexico, we're going to stay through the night, and then I'm not sure if it's the cartel leader or who it is that's coming to get them in the morning. But hey, all we've got to do, get into Mexico, hang out at this bar for the night.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the opening, I have such a hard time, and this is going to be super controversial. We might lose all our listeners this moment, but I have a love-hate relationship with Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
And it is mostly because I find him to be genuinely creepy.
Yeah.
I respect so much some of the work that he has done, but that is very hard to separate from, for me, the like creepy vibes that he gives me.
Yeah.
And then also that he then casts himself as a creep, like an actual creep in this film, further validated it for me too. So it's like he leaned into the creepiness of himself, I thought. And so I was just like, this guy is, let's just be honest, like he's a robber, he's a murderer, he's a rapist. He has fantasies in his head about women that are not real. And he then acts on them and does terrible things. And his brother, by the way, is a thief, a murderer, as necessary as he likes to point it out. I don't murder people who don't need to be murdered. And he is creeped out by his own brother.
Yeah, there's a lot to go off of that. I want to backtrack just a little bit to the Tarantino of it all. And that's, I get it that Tarantino does not seem to shy away from, I'm in defeat. But to play devil's advocate here, Tarantino worked at, was it Miramax with the Weinsteins?
Yeah.
He made films with them, did other things.
Yeah.
All the shit that came out on them.
This is the Miramax produced film.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the shit that came out on, to me,
you're like, is this cultural?
I'm like, not that. I'm like, Tarantino at least is outward about his creepiness and the things that he does. Nothing's ever come out about him of he's doing really bad, effed up shit. Like,
and listen,
in
we
real
don't
life.
kink shame. Like, you can have a foot in your mouth. Like, I support you.
So I will take a Tarantino creepy foot fetish being public knowledge, opposed to the shit that's happening behind closed doors in Hollywood.
And also, he can't control this, but his face is creepy. Like, he gives off creepy vibes. I'm not trying to disparage a man's looks, but there are people who their persona, like, that they're putting out there of this actor or what have you, like, fits their body type sometimes. And I feel like he is physically able to lean into the creep. Also, unrelated and deep cut, I am a huge Alias fan. Alias nerds unite, come at me. And he is in Alias for quite a while.
Okay.
As an actor, he comes and guest stars in Alias for, I want to say, almost a season and a half.
Okay.
He makes a pretty long and strong appearance, and I hated his character in that movie. I mean, that show. I think that's a contributing factor, is what I mean.
Okay.
Like, it's the cumulative of him that I'm like, oh, I don't love watching you. I love watching your work, but I don't love watching you.
Okay, I've got good news for you about 30 minutes in, but we'll get there in a second. So anyway, to spin off of your comment, I think one of the most fascinating parts of the first half of the movie is the dynamic between the two brothers. So you have George Clooney, his character's name is Seth.
Yeah.
And his brother's name is Richie.
Richie.
And it is interesting that he knows that his brother is effed up.
That's what I mean. But he even seems a little shocked by it here and there. You know what I mean? Maybe it's something he puts out of his mind here and there. He denies it because he just, how can you love your brother if not thing?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something like that. But, he comes back to the hotel room after the hostage has been brutally raped and murdered. Trigger warning, sorry, that needs to go in before that. Sorry.
And that's an interesting, the shot of that. And I mean,
the way he shoots that.
I don't give Rodriguez enough credit sometimes for his actual directorial, but the slow cuts of you just see George Clooney's face being like,
reacting to the different aspects
and
of
then
the
they're
scene
showing you these
in the
bloody...
room. The phone covered in blood, the splatter on the wall, and none of it's I think what's telling too is none of it's her.
Right.
None of it's her body. None of it's really the bed. It's everything else around it. It's almost as though maybe he can't look at her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he knows what happened. He can see what happened, but he can't see her.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because maybe that makes it too real. But he is so shooketh by that. He is shook in that moment, and he's looking at him, and he's like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, what all of us are thinking.
Yeah. It's him realizing, like, oh, Jesus.
You have a problem.
Yeah. And that's like, what do I have to do to fix it? Is there anything I can do to fix this?
Yeah.
So that's how the movie, like that dynamic is what starts it out.
Yeah.
For the first, I think 30 minutes.
I think it also makes it seem like it's going to be a slightly different movie.
That is why that's the entire premise of why I said, you know what, it would be so cool to watch this. And I hope that I hope you took the warning early and you're not still listening to this, because 30 minutes in, you think, oh, this is going to be some hostage type thing. It's this interesting dynamic of this preacher coming across these two psychopaths or 1.5 psychopaths. And how is this going to play out? And then it takes just a hard left turn.
It takes a hard left turn. And it's reminiscent of something else that is escaping me at the moment. But yes, that at the top is reminiscent of something else. It gives you a solid hostage movie vibe, things like that.
Yeah.
And you think this is where it's going to go. And then for sure, hard left turn. I just love the entrance again of Harvey Keitel as a fucking preacher.
Yes.
And also I just thought there's no way he's going to pull this off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not because Harvey Keitel's not an incredible actor. Don't get it twisted. But it's just not his type.
This is a year or two after Pulp Fiction and a few years after Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
And you've just known him as this cold-blooded killer in so many films.
For sure. And you just think, okay, this is not the vibe. But, the hat, the shirt, the whole look of him, he really commits to it.
Yeah.
And he's got an adopted son, obviously. She's maybe adopted, but you can't tell.
Yeah.
But he's visibly an adopted son, and the wife is not there. She has since passed, all these things. So his whole persona, like, he really commits to it. And he's a preacher struggling with his faith, which becomes a big theme of the movie.
Right.
But as soon as they enter, they re-hostage. Hostage has died. They don't have a hostage anymore. So they need a new hostage. This hostage happens to be handy because they have an RV.
I think that was actually the plot of Taken 2, right?
They got a re-hostage.
We got a re-hostage again. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, insert hostage here, basically. Yes. But this one was very convenient because it can hopefully get them across the border. Got an RV. Yep. It looks like a wholesome family, a little vacation. It's perfect setup. But even then, still feels hostagey.
Yes.
I think where it got creepy for me, again, I mean, it was still hostagey, but got creepy, was he's in the hotel room and he imagines Juliette Lewis saying that shit to
line.
him.
Yeah.
And I just so many of my notes here are like, this has not aged well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not even going to say some of the words that they say in this movie because it's so inappropriate. Teaser trailer, it's like anti-gay F word.
Yep.
It's ethnic slurs.
Yep.
It's certain levels of cursing. It's this right on the edge of underage girl. We don't know exactly how old she is. We know she's not 21.
Yeah.
But young girl, older man having these literal fantasies about her and her feed and whatever. And imagining her saying things like he has a problem.
Okay, I'm going to take that and I want to not take the other side, but I want to point out that we're in the head of a psychopath. We've talked about what a terrible person he is, and he's doing these terrible things. So it makes sense that when we're seeing things through, and it's played for comedy, that I will say is not fun. Doesn't make you feel good watching that. But I could understand how it's like, let's see things through a psychopath's eyes for a second and hear what he hears. I get that. And I think also we've established that these are not good people. I do have problems sometimes when a movie has hateable characters, but doesn't have them talk like those people would talk. I'm not saying that it's okay to use specific types of words and terminology.
You're saying there's an authenticity to it.
But it makes it feel real because that's being said.
Right.
And it's
and again, I think it's dated too, right? Like we have to acknowledge that people said the R word in the 90s.
It doesn't make it okay, but yes.
And look, I mean, we probably said it in school. Like what? I was around that age. Like we said, you live and you learn.
We own our bullshit. We know. We were all immature idiots at some point.
And you do the best you can until you better, and then you do better. So we got to give people credit where it's due. But yeah, it's still jarring to hear and to go back and be like, ugh, this just gives me more ick about all of it, more grossness about all of it. But then, to your point, it shifts gears. They get across the border, and then they get to the Titty Twister, which is the bar that they're going to meet Carlos, and they've got to get to Dawn. That's the whole premise. They've got to get till dawn because that's when Carlos is coming to meet them. They just figure they're going to kill some time in the Titty Twister for a while.
It takes a very lighthearted turn for 10 minutes.
For 10 minutes.
Oh, they're bonding. It's like this. So the George Clooney chills out. He's not being as much of a gun in your face person.
Until they enter, though. Because like you said.
And then he tells everybody to play it cool.
Because he's in a good mood for 2 seconds. And he tells everybody to play it cool. And he's like, I love this vibe that we have. Like, don't fuck with me. Don't fuck with you vibe. And then the second he walks into the bar, he punches the door guy. Who, granted, had just been screaming about all various forms of pussy for 5 minutes. So I was down for that guy to get punched. Don't get me wrong. But I was also like, can we be calm for 5 seconds, please?
Yeah.
And he cannot keep it cool.
Also, while we're on the subject of Carlos and the doorman, did you pick up on Cheech Marin in 3 different roles?
I have that note 12 times in this movie of Cheech is fucking everywhere was my note.
Just like, I guess we'll just give him 3 salaries and call it a day.
Yeah, he just was like, I want to be in every scene, basically. I can't not be in a scene. So he is the door guy. He gets punched in the face. He's the cop at the border. And then of course he comes in later as Carlos, who didn't know that this bar what it was either. Very interesting tie together for him to be at all the phases, I think, of the movie. But yeah, he goes in, George Clooney, Seth, walks into this bar, immediately picking fights with Danny Trejo at the bar, no less. And this is where I gained a lot of respect for the preacher, quote unquote, who's been pretty chill, mostly chill, reasonably chill for a dad whose kids are being held hostage.
Yeah.
And then he steps up. He steps up. He's okay, I got this. I'm the truck driver. These are my friends. Let's keep it cool. But he can on his own.
Yeah, where do you think that comes? Like, from a character perspective, I have my own theory, but why is it that suddenly this preacher is, I'm going to get him to chill out? Like, I'm going to step in and take care of these 2 psycho brothers in some capacity and keep them from escalating things.
I think he really believes that they're going to let them go. I think that's why he's committed up to this point as much as he has been, or he could have raised hell at the border if he wanted. I think they had that heart to heart in the RV of we understand each other. And if he touches my daughter, I'm going to kill him. And we're on the same page kind of thing. Like once he said that and he understood that, I think, and affirmed that was understandable kind of thing, I think that they had this detente. They had come to an understanding. And from then on, it was, again, get to Dawn, get me and my family out. And whatever I have to do to commit to that, I'm going to do. And I even, I have the note that they become this like weird little family. Like a new iteration of this little family. And they get past the fight with Danny and they go over and have some drinks. He makes them drink with him, basically. Seth is like, no, y'all are going to drink with me. He tries to pass. But then even that, like when Harvey Keitel decides to drink with him, again, another detente, another moment of agreement.
To your family.
You're right. To your family. Weird family.
Yeah.
It's like a weird family.
Yeah.
And then, of course, shit goes down because Seth picked fights coming in the door.
Yeah. Also, we have, speaking about the cast a little bit, you get Danny Trejo when he was only like 52 years old. Not like now when he's like 86.
Right.
Like, Danny Trejo is just perpetually, I don't know when he started acting, but
he's in everything, I feel like. I mean, he's definitely in everything that Quentin Tarantino does. You know what I mean? He makes an appearance at times that you don't expect. I also felt like he was going to last longer than he did, to be honest.
Yeah.
But you can't overlook all these characters. I mean, In the interest of time, I'm going to summarize some highlights for me,
let's
which
hit it.
were, of course, Salma Hayek coming in and doing her.
Now, was this her first film role?
No, she had already done Desperado.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is 96 and Desperado's 95. But these are her first two big ones. And so, yeah, she does the Satanico Pandemonium, I think is what it's called.
With a really good backing band, by the way.
With a really good
Can we call out how good the band
like
is?
solid band.
Yeah. I think they're not a one-hit wonder. They've got 3 bangers in there.
And let's give her credit, too, because
Yeah.
girl literally went to therapy to do this job. Like, literally, she had a terrible fear of snakes and spent months in therapy to do this dance. Literally. And also, can we talk about how she's in the movie for 10 minutes max?
But that's
months
what you
of therapy
remember.
to do it.
But that is what you remember about this film.
That is
it's
what
probably,
you remember about this
it
movie.
awakened something in me when I was like a teenager. I'm not going to get into the details, but I like Selma Hayek.
We can acknowledge Salma Hayek is a lot of people's sexual awakening. Let's be honest. It's fine. It's fine. She's gorgeous again. And then she puts her foot in Richie's mouth. She literally gives him whiskey, tequila, whatever. It ends up being down her leg, which, by the way, is one of the coolest moves I've ever seen. That was pretty cool.
Giving me new ideas for the bedroom.
I know. I was like, listen, I have never been this sexy, and do I now aspire to do it? Yes, absolutely. How do I
think I have been, honestly. I think tequila running down my leg hair into Quentin Tarantino's mouth, I think he would love it.
I think he would love it. I think we've demonstrated that with this movie. But yeah, no, that's an iconic scene. I think she does an amazing job of it. Danny Trejo, of course, does an amazing job. Him and Cheech come in, pick the fight, shit goes down, and then chaos ensues.
Yeah.
Chaos utterly ensues. But the vampires. So the spoiler alert for the umpteenth time, they're all vampires.
And watching this back, that's why I had that. I was following, like tracking throughout the film. At what point do I start to think that's where this is going? And literally until the fight happens and they like knock out and shoot 3 different people. And then Richie raises his hand up and it's got the blood.
Yeah.
And
when you see her
Salma
reaction.
Hayek's character look at it, that's the first hint you get that there are vampires involved in this movie at all.
Unless you watch the trailer like me.
That's okay. And that's what I mean is I wish that they had been less obvious about what it was, because I think if you show a newbie this and they don't know anything about it, it just jumps into
jumps
like
at you.
hard.
But I do think like she has 2 phases. I noted 2 phases where they cut to her, where she is seeing the blood, reacting, keeping it cool. And then there's a second shot, a second phase of she is no longer keeping it cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, shit is about to go down. And it sure does. She has a snake head, which, by the way, was a weird amalgamation of I'm a vampire, but also a snake. And that, I think, is my biggest complaint about all the vampires in this movie, is that they're all a weird iteration of vampire. And then some of them are not. But they lump them all into
appearance.
There's no uniform anything. One of them is, even George Clooney says multiple times, he's like, I didn't believe in vampires, but now I do believe in vampires because I believe my eyes. And I'm like, do you? Because there's a lot of shit going on here that are not vampires, it feels. But then they are, because they kill them the way that they kill vampires. But also the thing that stood out to me, because I saw it in this order, is that Joss Whedon stole his vampire looks from this movie.
Yeah, the furrowed brow, like the weird,
the physical faces,
heightened forehead, angled eyes.
Buffy comes out in 97. I looked. I was like, I have strong feelings that Joss Whedon stole this. He's garbage. His work is great, but he's garbage. But anyway, he stole that. Like, the aesthetic is exactly the same, especially the ones who are a little bit more uniform. You know what I mean? Like, they all.
I mean,
look
by
like
the
that.
end of the film, when all the vampires that were not initially in the club, because they kill all the vampires in the club pretty much. Then there's all the vampires outside flying around that start infiltrating. But when they all show up, it's more of a, I wouldn't say traditional, but they look almost like the early 90s like witches
vampires.
movie.
They've transformed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those ones look a little more uniform, but I mean, at some point you get a dog vampire out of nowhere.
No,
like,
okay. The one that did it for me, though, is Sex Machine turning into a vampire and then turning into basically an ROUS. I was like, is this Princess Bride or is this Dusk Till Dawn? Because it's straight up an ROUS that they then have to fight and murder. He is a giant rat vampire. Yeah. And I was like, no, I can't.
So do you want to touch base really quick?
Yeah, on Sex Machine?
Sex Machine. And I didn't, even on my 3rd or 4th watch, I still couldn't tell you the other guy's name with the cigar. that's the other side character briefly after the only survivors are the main family.
I read it because I give things a goog, but I do not remember it, no.
Yeah. I mean, the character himself is memorable, but I couldn't tell you his name.
No
Sex
idea.
Machine, I could
You know why you can't help but remember Sex Machine? For two reasons for me. One, I have to watch things with captions because I am 1,000. Two, so they put Sex Machine in front of his track. So that's how I knew. But two, that fucking codpiece, though.
Yeah.
That also, I rewound it multiple times to figure out how it worked. Does it connect to his brain? Because there's no visible trigger.
I'm wondering if maybe he's wearing a jacket usually when it happens. So maybe it's like a little thing in his
He has some kind of trigger that is not visible.
Yeah.
And I watched multiple times to try and find it. I spent an alarming amount of time trying to find where that trigger was. And I was also like, really? That was just my reaction in real life.
But okay, we don't want to delve too much. I know that with Del Toro, we did go pretty heavy into his style. And I think maybe a staple of Robert Rodriguez is just off-the-wall weaponry. Because you think about Planet Terror and like leg gun, and you think about El Mariachi and the guitar gun. So I think that's
You're right. It's true. It's definitely a hallmark of his. I think that's true. But yeah, I definitely had a strong reaction to it. That's for sure. So again, in the interest of time, shit goes down.
Yeah.
Basically, the entire family is killed except for Juliette Lewis. And then, of course, Seth, the primary character, which I also feel like Seth is basically George Clooney's evil twin. Little bit of George Clooney's evil twin. Also, stay pretty, George, because he kept shooting Salma's character, and I kept being like, stop shooting her. It's literally not working. You are pretty but dumb, sir. Like, it just kept going. I wanted it to stop. And then they figured out a job for him, but essentially I felt for a long time like his gun was for him to pose with.
Yeah.
I was like, this is just George Clooney posing. They're like, we know he's hot. Let's give him some good pose shots.
Yes.
But hey, he makes it out.
Yes.
He makes it out. She makes it out, and he makes it out, and she wants to glom onto him. She wants to go with him.
I like the way they played that, too. I couldn't remember how it ended from the last time I watched. I was like, do they leave together? And she makes the attempt of like, hey, you need some company.
I knew she was going to ask.
And
I did know that.
What's his last line? I'm evil, but I'm not that evil. Or
he said
something.
I'm a bastard, but I'm not a fucking bastard.
Yeah. And I'm not, kid,
it's next level.
You're not coming with me. Like, he just...
I'm going to El Rey. Shit's going to get real. But also, let's talk about how bad El Rey must be for him to be like, we just went through all that, but you can't come with me.
You're not ready for this.
You're not ready for this. We need a part 2 where we figure out where the fuck he just went.
They did make a part 2.
But it wasn't for that, was it?
Part 4. And a part... they made a lot of these, but George Clooney is not.
I saw that. I saw that they made more, but again, I want to follow him. I want to follow Seth and figure out what just happened. But yeah, I saw that they made more, and I was like, no.
They probably
it's
have.
A hard no.
I don't think I've seen any of the sequels, but I would assume Cheech has
27 roles.
Yeah.
And Danny Trejo's in all of them because he doesn't say no to a movie is what we have learned about him. He just does them all.
Get paid.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I like that she doesn't go. I like that he doesn't let her go. But I did know she was going to ask. I 100% knew she was going to ask.
Anything from you as far as we got into visually the Crimson Peak discussion? Did anything stand out to you as far as like cinematography, visuals, makeup, special effects, anything like that, gore even?
I mean, it had some solid throwbacks to like Tarantino shots that he likes to do, like the trunk shot.
Yeah.
The trunk shot for the hostage at the top. Like that's a classic. I think it's in probably every single one of his fucking movies.
Yeah.
And then it had some Robert Rodriguez things like we talked about, some kind of hallmarks to that. As far as how it was shot though, I thought it was traditional, basic, nothing bad at all. I just mean, there weren't a lot of shots that stood out to me as being extraordinary. Or
no.
I don't think it wouldn't have necessarily made sense anyway. I think you're on the ground level with everyone that's in this battle. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have that lens. We are in the thick of this shit. And this is what we're seeing from our perspective. I think it's intentional for sure, but I don't think there's any like crazy shots.
No, I think if anything, going back to the flickering shot when George Clooney's looking at the death scene at the beginning, but aside from that, the only other one that I would be like, oh, that felt cool, or like very Rodriguez Tarantino-y was when they first arrive at the bar, and I don't think it's a one shot, but there's multiple panning shots of just how insane this bar is with the dancers, and like you see the bar and you see all the patrons. I thought that established sort of the vibe of that, and that's when the film gets, like I said,
it's
lighthearted.
It's like very
for 10
Babylon Bacchanal vibe of that place, and you get the full 360 of it for sure. I also loved when when they kill Richie again. It's not necessarily like a unique shot, but it's a big moment because he's turned and Seth has to decide to kill him. But it was this very, you can't make fun of my brother, but I can move. It was like, you can't kill my brother, but I can kind of
hold
move.
Him down. I liked his last line to him of, here's the peace in death that I couldn't give you in life. It gives him the opportunity to...
They give him a lot of poignance here and there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He has another moment, and I can't remember exactly, but he has another moment in the RV. He has that moment where he sees the woman's body early on. He has that line at the end. Mm-hmm. He has the moment again, utterly poetic, of him turning the girl down. You can't come with me. And these are all, like, I think, triggers to his... not only his humanity, but a little bit more of his empathy of, I am a thief and I'm a bad guy, but I'm not like a bad guy.
Yeah, I think it's you bring up some good points, and it's worth touching on that he doesn't feel at any point. I think the easy route would be, let's make him an action movie star and make him. You don't. It's George Clooney. I think that's a very intentional casting.
Yeah.
He's not running around one man armying this entire thing of vampires. He is a complex, complicated character. Yeah. And I like that about him now that you mention it.
And this is him coming off of VR too. Mm. And even Tarantino said that. He was like, it was some cheesy line of, I loved that he went from being a guy who saves people in the ER to sending them to the ER.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to break out of typecasting. Like, I can play more than just doctors. I'm going to go be a vampire. You got it.
What would have happened if he hadn't, to be honest?
Right.
You know,
right.
What would his career look like now if he hadn't just completely 180'd it?
Yeah.
Those plays don't always play well, but it did play well here, I think, for sure. Awesome. So, I mean, all that to say, I was super annoyed for a lot of it. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's fair.
Spook factor for me, spooky factor, I don't think it was scary.
No.
It would be like a 3. I don't know. There aren't even really jump scares. You know what I mean? It's just gore. It's just a little battle. And when those things happen, you expect them to happen. So they're not particularly
And it's also
scary.
very 90s.
Yeah.
It's at that time in film history where we were walking the line between practical effects and digital effects. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of practical makeup on the vampires, but then they'll get staked and there's this crappy fake fire effect.
It's got to be a little campy, even for a rating perspective. They actually said that they had to use green blood to get over the censors. Okay. So like they purposely made it a little bit more campy to get a larger audience too, I think. That's how you get more audience for sure. So it wasn't scary. It wasn't spooky in that way. I would say, again, like a 2 or a 3. Overall film, I wouldn't give it much higher. This is where I was like, Lemar and I have different taste in movies. And that's fine because I think it was like, I'd say it was like a 5. It's not something I would particularly watch again.
Yeah.
But would I suggest other people watch it? Yes.
Yeah.
To your point, I think it's a fun flick. You watch it one time through, whatever. Maybe you watch it a couple more times. It's not one I'm going to go back and watch.
Right.
But I see why people want to watch it. But it's also, again, I think certain things didn't age well for me as part of that as well.
Yeah.
But I'd say like a 5-ish.
Yeah. This feels, I don't think this was intended, but it feels as though our two choices today, I think Crimson Peak, I could see women watching that more frequently or rewatching that more frequently than a man might. Whereas I think Dusk Till Dawn was definitely aimed at teenage males. Yeah. And that's who probably the folks that are going to watch it more frequently. Yeah. It's not to say you can't enjoy both, but I think when we're talking target markets, that is an unintentional byproduct.
There is a targeting here happening. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks for participating in that for me. I appreciated my homework. We'll have to do this again. We'll have to do another one of these, but we're going to have to strive to find things we haven't seen also. So that'll be another challenge, but all good. Well, thank you for doing a spooky movie ep with me. We have another one coming. So we're going to do another one. Come back to hear us on Halloween, where we're going to talk about a top 10 Halloween movie list and decide whether or not we agree.
It's going to be very controversial.
It is going to be super controversial. We're going to make a lot of enemies on that episode, I think.
Probably.
But also, I think we're going to talk about what's missing. That was my teaser trailer for that one. I think there's some stuff missing from that top 10 for sure.
I like that.
All righty, guys. Go now, have a drink, and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers.